Okay, so I'm supposed to be talking about poetry, and I've honestly learned so much being here. I've just been absorbing and absorbing and absorbing, and I was nodding because sometimes I need to nod for something to download properly. But I I'd like to speak about poetry, but one thing I'd like to clarify to everyone is that anyone can write a poem. Anyone can actually write. It's the same way anyone can draw. Most artists will tell you that drawing itself is not art because anyone can look at something and basically learn to copy that image. But the art is visualizing an image that maybe you haven't seen or didn't previously exist, and then somehow bringing it from within you and translating it to the physical world. That is art. I have a definition of art, and my definition comes from my own experiences, but also what I do, as in basically this is me. Art is the creative expression of thought used to convey a message or demonstrate an ideal. At its highest point, it is the voice of culture and can be used to both destabilize and restructure the value system of a target society. Basically, at that moment, it means that art is not just drawing or writing anything down. Art is not just, I want to act and I do a skit. That's not it. Art basically has a source of inspiration. There is a reason. Anything that was created without a reason is pointless. Art is always done with a reason. Humanity, you are a work of art, because everything God created, if you look at Genesis, he looked at it and he said, it was good. God does not create anything ugly. So that's one thing we have to understand. And so in that context, what is poetry? I would describe poetry basically as a communicating of words using rhythm and imagery to basically pass across a message, pass across an emotion, pass across an ideology. That is what it is. And words, as was previously discussed, words are the building blocks to everything. When God created the earth, words, let there be. He used words to bring things into existence. He used words to pass across his message, and his message became life. And Pastor was saying something. He said that, in the beginning was the Word was God, and the Word was with God. So in that context, you get to see that everything, the building blocks to everything from our genetics, because when they say, what's your blood type, what's your genome, A, B, this, O, it's words, it's letters. They're the frequency that life revolves in. And so when you write, you have to understand that you are passing across a frequency. What you're supposed to transmit is life. You're not supposed to, I feel like writing. That's not what it's about. And so in that sense, I believe people are born with a gift. So yes, everyone was given the gift of creation because God made us in our image. God made us in his image, sorry. And so, and in his spiritual image, in his likeness, and so he made us everyone with the ability to create. Now, everyone's expression of creativity is different. I had the pleasure of talking to the daughter of a renowned artist, and when she was finding her art, she had to speak to her dad because he's in his 80s, and his name is Demas Noko. Some of you would have heard of him. He's a famous architect. But he said that, he hasn't painted for almost 40 or 50 years, yet his paintings go for millions. And she asked him why. I said, I have nothing else to say on canvas. So sometimes some of us are suffering from writer's block, and we're figuring, how do I need to do this? How do I need to do that? But there's times where you just take a deep breath in and don't force yourself, don't box yourself. Sometimes as we go through experiences in life, we have to understand that our method of expressing ourselves has changed. And Mara's Mirror, I wrote that in a very, very strange time. It wasn't my normal writing style. I like to rhyme, yes, but I also like to write short stories a lot. And so Mara's Mirror was me mixing poetry within a short story and using it to convey and using it to pass across my message. So in that sense, I'm going to just a brief breakdown on poetry. When you write poetry, one thing you have to be consistent about is rhythm. And the easiest way to get rhythm is to count syllables, the number of syllables in each sentence, in each stanza, or in each verse. So that when I said, ruby red droplets shimmered as they spilled from an open vein, He loves me not. Why was she staring at her mirror again? Immediately you can see there's some kind of rhythm. There is a tempo to it being passed across, which basically brings me to spoken word. The only difference between spoken word and poetry, or poetry and songs, is the communication of sound. Sound is being applied to rhythm, to imagery, and use it to convey and being passed across to your ears, to your physical senses. And imagery, we tend to think imagery is about visualizing, but there are many ways to visualize something. When you write, you have an image in your head, and that image sometimes can be a smell. It's like sensory. You just smell something and it awakens your senses. Sometimes you hear someone say something and you just capture an image. Our senses, everything. If you can't see something, you can't bring it to life. You can't become what you do not see. You can't write down what you do not see. It just doesn't work. You'll look at it and you'll be like, meh, that's not what it's about. So anytime you're writing poems, immediately you don't just write for writing's sake. Sometimes as writers we try and force ourselves to write, and there are times when you have to insist, like, yeah, you have to break the dam. But there are other times when instead you just need to meditate. You need to brood. Since we're believers here, I can say that sometimes it helps asking for Holy Spirit for help. It helps not. I've been guilty of relying on my own power and might to write my poems. It can happen to anyone. I use my own skill, but then sometimes I come out and be like, that's not what God was saying. It comes out like that. It can happen to anyone. But when you're a believer, you have to understand that your source is not from yourself. Your source is from the person who gave you the gifting. Because you can have a gifting. It's cool, and I believe giftings are spirituals. Are spiritual. And that means there's always an inspiration behind it. I believe inspiration is spiritual. It doesn't not anyone can just be inspired to do anything. Inspiration can either come from God or it can come from somewhere else. And so just to add to what I'm saying really is that when you rely on God, like, okay, God, how do I do this? Teach me. I don't know how to write. I have to tell him that sometimes. I don't know how to do it. I don't know what to say. I don't know how to go about it. But my pen, there's a Bible scripture that David said, my mouth is like that of a ready scribe. And you see, it's speaking words like that bring God's presence into us. It's creating, you can even create your identity as a writer. The words are powerful. Words are the building block. So you have to be conscious of what you read, what you hear, what you speak as a writer, because these are the things that you're going to communicate with your audience. And it just really brings me to my next point. As writers, as poets, as spoken word artists, we have to be conscious of mood, of our environment, of what's going on around us, in the sense that someone can read a poem and it's really, really good. The poem is beautiful, but it didn't suit the mood. It didn't suit the atmosphere of the place. So some people will like it, but other people will be like, that wasn't quite what we needed to hear. That wasn't what needed to be passed across in this season at this time. So these are the things as writers, as spirit artists, I believe, maybe that's as spirit writers, we have to be conscious of. We have to be sensitive to atmosphere. We have to be sensitive to the spirit within us during those moments. I believe I will just share a poem on the power of words, and I'll use that poem to close. Sorry. Okay. Words, plain words, hold the keys to love and hate, unlocking every door and deciding every fate. Words, plain words, allow me to show you their traits and how words shape our everyday lives, both without and innate. Malik was furious. After all he toiled, he'd still gotten the sack. He was delirious, his blood boiled, as he spoke words he wouldn't take back. As you've taken my life off course, I swear yours will run off its track. His boss waved his hand in dismissal. Not my problem, this is your nut to crack. He didn't see Malik's words heading towards him like guided missiles on the attack. That man soon lost his position in marriage. Like a marker, Malik's words had colored him black. Sandra breathed in deeply as she said, "I'm sure I'm not going to pass." Her friend Lucy rolled her eyes and said, "You're seriously behaving like an ass." Words are weighty, and over our lives, our words bear even more mass. Sandra didn't believe in the power of words, and her words had been particularly crass. She didn't see her words take shape and rain over the examiner as water wets the grass. He hardly read her exam script and failed someone supposed to be top of her class. "I'm sorry, there's nothing we can do. The two of you will never walk again." The two elderly ladies, Naomi and Esther, stared at each other and wondered if they were sane. The doctor held out his medical reports. There was no easy way to explain. "The nerve damage is severe. Messages aren't received from your legs to your brain." Esther shifted her wheelchair and left the room, while Naomi listened in growing pain, as the doctor's words locked onto her leg, making sure they would forever be in chains. And there you have it. Every spoken word hangs like a cloud in the air, waiting for those there to enshroud, and springing fruits they were called to bear. They water cities, nations, and people with equal measures of hope and fear, harvesting the results of our faith and corrupting all our idle cares. When we speak, we create changes. That is the DNA all humans share. Speaking of sharing, I have one more story that unfortunately is all too rare. Esther left the doctor's office. She could not listen to what he had to say. For as long as she had a mouth to speak, she knew that she would walk another day. "His words are a lie, I will definitely walk," and she used those words to pray. And she saw herself walking as a fact and refused to fall to dismay. As the shocked doctor's words eventually changed themselves from nay to yea, and her words not only helped her walk, but to live in her own way. Thank you, everyone.